Well, good morning, church. It is great to see you guys here worshiping with us on this Sunday morning, and welcome those online that are watching wherever you are. We are glad that you're worshiping with us. So today, as you have probably picked up, the big theme is going to be focusing on hospitality and looking at that and what it means for the church and for us as individuals. So the passage that we'll be hearing from is coming from Acts chapter 18, verses 24 through 26. So I invite you to follow along in your own Bible, or you can follow along as the words are presented there on the screen. So Acts chapter 18, verse 24 through 26. Now there came to Ephesus a Jew named Apollos from Alexandria, and he was an eloquent man, well versed in the Scriptures, and he had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with burning enthusiasm and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, but when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained the way of God to him more accurately. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So it's hard to do this, but reflect back with me 5 years ago, okay? 5 years ago. It was the dreaded year, 2020, okay? A year that all of us will probably never forget, all right? And I remember in my life in 2020, in January, we had just moved into our new home, and we were getting things situated in the new home. We were painting walls, putting furniture, and figuring out where things were going to go. And we were really enjoying life, enjoying our new spot, our new house, our new neighborhood. All was great with the world at the start of 2020 for the Johnston household. But then I remember spring break came, and the kids were out of school, and we had some time off. And so what was I doing in my new home? I was painting walls. And I remember my wife was a hospital nurse at the time, and she was at work, and she didn't get home till after 7 p.m. because she worked 12-hour day shifts. So I remember the kids were at the house mulling around, being on spring break, and I was rolling a wall, painting it, and expecting my wife to come home anytime after 7. And I'm a news junkie, so when I'm working, I have the news on. And I was watching the news, painting, waiting for my wife to come home. And then the president shows up on the TV, and his health secretaries and all these folks. And he began to mention this thing about a virus that was coming around, and that we were going to defeat the virus and flatten the curve by everybody staying home 14 days. That was going to fix COVID for us, just staying home 14 days. And I remember the Sunday before this news announcement at church, I was in the traditional service assisting as the associate pastor. And after the service, I remember shaking hands with folks. And some folks were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be shaking hands. Ha, 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 there's a virus going around. We're like, whatever, We didn't believe it. But when that news announcement came, and then my children's spring break turned into the longest spring break on record, then go back to after Labor Day, things changed. The world changed. We've changed. And a little part of me got a little nervous because, yes, kids can stay home from school. Yes, we can stay in our house. Yes, I can work from home and I can film sermons and post them online and not interact with a lot of people. But I had this little undercurrent of nervousness for my wife because she was one of the few occupations that didn't get to stay home. They had to go to work. They couldn't call in. They couldn't social distance when you work at a hospital. You had to go to work. So I always kind of, in my mind, I'm like, if someone's going to get this random new virus, it's probably going to be her first. And at that time, we didn't know what it was going to do to you. We just saw all the horror stories on the news that it was really bad. Well, we rocked along for maybe 2 months until she finally did get COVID. And she was one of the first 400 cases in the state of Mississippi. And in that day and age, if someone in your household got COVID, everybody else had to go get tested. And I remember taking my kids to their pediatrician, and the pediatrician came out in a spacesuit in the parking lot to swab their noses. Then I had to go to my physician, and he came out in a spacesuit to swab my nose. And I'm like, we're going to get it. She's got it. We've been at home with her. We're all going to get it. We were all negative, which was, I don't know what was better. Because in that day and age, if you had COVID, they wanted you to totally isolate, Not 5 days, not 10 days. It was 14 days. They wanted you to not be around other individuals. So in our new home, our new sanctuary that I've been painting and fixing up, we had to isolate her, my wife, upstairs, and the rest of the Johnston tribe went downstairs for 14 days. I remember making food, bringing it up to the room, dropping it off at the doorstep, going downstairs. She'd get it, and then she'd leave it outside her door, and I'd take it downstairs. On trash days, I rolled the trash can underneath the second-story window, and she would drop it in the trash can, and I had a mask and gloves, and I'm sure the new neighbors were like, what is this couple doing? We got letters from the health department, from Dr. Dobbs, all 5 of us, that stated, you are to quarantine for 14 days. You are to not interact with other individuals. If you go outside your home and leave your property, you will be fined $600 and face 6 months in prison. My 5-year-old daughter, or whatever, how old she was, she got a letter from Dr. Dobbs that said, well, you can't go play in the street or they're going to come arrest you and put you in jail. Okay? They were serious. The health department called my wife, talked to her on the phone, and she's like, can my husband please go get a click list of groceries? No, ma'am, we prefer for him to not leave, even though he's negative. We were home. We were stuck, isolated, not knowing the neighbors. I was homeschooling 3 kids. My daughter, I promoted her from kindergarten to 1st grade or whatever grade she was in because we were done with that packet. I just took it and threw it at the school when we were done. It was a difficult time, and it can feel very lonely in those situations. And I'm sure each and every one of you have been in a situation where you have felt lonely, isolated, and on your little island. But I remember in that time of 14 days quarantine where we were all sleeping downstairs, and we were all tired of each other, and my wife was upstairs isolated. I was like, I got to go get in the yard and cut the grass. The grass really didn't need cutting, but I just needed to get out in the yard. I was like, I can't get arrested for cutting my grass. So I went outside, and I remember cutting the grass, listening to my Spotify, my headphones, and phone in the pocket. I get a phone call, and it is from my SPRC chair. For those that are not familiar with the Methodist system, your local church, St. Matthew's, has basically a personnel committee called the SPRC, and they basically deal with hiring and firing of employees, and they also talk to your bishop when you want a new pastor, okay? So they're basically the personnel arm of the church, and so the SPRC chair, I got a call from her, and they knew at the church that obviously I was quarantined, and she said, Brian, you're going to tell me no, but I need you to not. And I said, uh-oh, what's this? She said, I know you can't go to the store. I know you've told us you're fine. I know you don't like help, but let us help you. Let us bring you at least dinner these 14 days so that way you don't have to worry about it. And of course, my instinct was like, no, we're good, which we were fine. But at that time, I said, you know what? I'm not going to refuse their help. She's telling me, let it happen. I'm going to let it happen. So for 14 days, around 5 p.m., a meal was dropped off at our front porch. And I looked forward to that meal because it was the only interaction that I got that was outside of my tribe. And so I would go to the door. They'd leave it. They'd stand down the side by the mailbox. We'd wave, have long conversations, all this and that. And that happened routinely. And I was thankful. Initially, my first instinct would have been, no, we're good. But by having that hospitality that the church showed me as a pastor, it grew on me. It made me realize that, you know what? As a church, that's what we're here for. We're here to be the extension of God's love and grace in this broken world in whatever form it shows up, however we are called to do it, whether it's dropping meals off at the front porch, or visiting somebody in the hospital, or just the phone call and text saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. What can I pray for? And so the theme today is hospitality. And that little story, my COVID story, just shows just a glimmer of what the church can do for people in this time. COVID is now long gone. Everything is to the new normal, let's say. There's vaccines, there's medications. If you're fever-free in 24 hours, you're released into the world. No more 14-day quarantine. But in those dark times in our lives, the church, this is where the church needs to be. And so today's story, about Apollos, a well-spoken individual who knew a lot about scriptures, but yet still had some flaws in his teaching. Priscilla and Aquila, individuals who showed the Apostle Paul hospitality and would follow him, is why they're here in Ephesus because of Paul, and they heard Apollos teaching. They decided, he's great. He's got great talents. He can do great things. He's well-spoken, but there's still some flaws in him. Now, they could have put him on blast, criticized him publicly, or, probably even worse, done nothing at all. But yet they decided to do something. And what did they do? They pulled him aside. They pulled him aside and said, hey, we see great things in you, but there are just a few things that you need to fix in your teachings, and you'll be even greater after that. They taught him the truth. They taught him how to be a faithful preacher. And they did this because of love. Like I said, they could have put him on blast. They could have criticized him in front of others, or they could have done nothing at all. But that's not love. They saw great potential in him, and out of love, which was really probably hard and uncomfortable for them to do, pulled him aside and enlightened him about the way, taught him more about Christ. When I read this, it makes me think back at a time when I was a student teacher, and I was in my classroom that I'd been assigned, and I was doing my thing as a student teacher. And one of the things they tell you to do when you get a new class is to go over the rules, right? Lay down the law. Tell them how things are going to work under your authority in the classroom, right? Set the tone. And so I remember I was assuming a class that a teacher had been teaching all year long, and she had her rules on the wall. And so I remember I was taught, well, hey, when you get your class, go over the rules. So I went to the rules, my first day in class. I pointed to the wall, and I said, hey, I know these may seem silly and stupid, but we're going to go over them. At the end of the day, the teacher, that's class I took over, and she sat in on a lot of my lessons, as she was required to do. She pulled me aside and said, hey, look, there's something you need to fix. When you go over the rules, don't call them silly and stupid, because if you do, then why are they even there? If they're there for a reason, and they're important. So you need to make sure your kids that you teach see them as important as well. That little moment I remembered all the way through my teaching career, that whenever I had my class with my own students, I didn't try to be cool and say, these are silly and dumb, but we got to go over them. This handbook's stupid. We're not going to do it. I didn't say that. I said, this is important. We've got to go over it. They're here for a reason. But they enlightened me, or she enlightened me, and corrected me, and I appreciated that. And so here in this story, we have Apollos corrected by Priscilla and Aquila. And they did this to Apollos because they appreciated him and they loved him. I am thankful that today we are doing communion. As Ginger said as she was leading worship, that the table is the ultimate sign of hospitality that God has provided to us. Right? Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross, his last meal, shows how much God really loves us. And I know there's moments in our lives where we may not feel that important, and we may be really low. But it's in those moments may we remember the table and what Jesus did for us. That no matter what goes on in your life, God loves you more than you can ever imagine. That God sacrificed his own son for our mistakes. He died for us so that we can be made whole, that we have the opportunity to be with God forever in eternity. And so the ultimate sign of hospitality is shown here and through communion, that when we take this bread and this juice, we remember on Christ's sacrifice that his body was broken for us, he shed blood for us. And that when we take these elements, we are connected to him in that moment and to his love and to his grace. And so I think as a church, we need to remember and lean into what would be our greatest strength, which is hospitality, sharing love, sharing grace. And some practical ways that can be played out is that when you come to church Sunday mornings and you see a new person in your Sunday school class or a new person sitting in the chair, acknowledge them. Now, some people may not want to have a full conversation, but just saying, hey, good morning, glad you're here, is showing hospitality. It's showing that individual that they matter, that you genuinely care that they're here. As a church, and this is one of the great things we do here, we have great outreach ministries. We do a lot for our community and international community. Right now, we are collecting school supplies for kids that are connected to MADCAP, which is Madison Countyans Allied Against Poverty. It's a nonprofit in Canton. And Trinity Mission Center, a Hispanic mission in Forest. We partner with them, and we are a part of their school supply drives. And so one way that you can tell those individuals in Canton and Forest that they matter is by us providing them, hey, here's some paper. Here's some binders. Here's some pencils so you can have what you need for school. Outreach. One way the church can show hospitality is through our outreach. When we go and serve in Honduras, that's showing love and grace. When we bring people meals for our congregational care ministry, for folks who have surgeries, are going through major life milestones, new babies, death in the family. One way to show your hospitality is by helping out providing a meal or taking a meal. There are many ways as a church that we can show this amazing hospitality, this love and this grace that God has poured upon us. Another thing to remember too, just like our table, that it is for everybody. It's not exclusive. It's not for people who have their life together. It's not for people who have tons of money. It's not for people who have power and influence. It is for everybody. It is for the poor, for the broken, for the immigrant, for the homeless, for those who are battling addictions. It's for everybody. Hospitality, love, and grace is for everybody. And we need to be reminded of that. We need to be reminded that the motivation of what we do should be out of love and grace and out of hospitality. So as we reflect upon Priscilla and Aquila and their love for Apollos and believing in him and correcting him, as we go through our days and our weeks and our months, may we be the ambassadors of Christ that show love and grace to people who come to church that are new, to our community, to our international community. That is who we are. That is our calling. That is what we're supposed to do. And as I look out here in this congregation, and I know the congregation worshiping in traditional service, I know we have the gift and ability to do that. We have the gift and the ability. God believes in us and calls us to be hospitable. So may we pray, may we seek ways that we can live that out in our church life and in our personal life as well.